Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. I'm going to show you 3 video clips and then I'm going to provide my commentary on the other side.
Talking about the guys. We know you have no business putting your hands on a woman. I don't know how many times I got to reiterate that. But as a man who was raised by women, see, I know what I'm going to do if somebody touches a female member of my family. I know what I'm going to do. I know what my boys are going to do. I know what I'm going to have to remind myself that I work for the worldwide leader. I'm going to have to get law enforcement officials involved because of what I'm going to be tempted to do. But what I've tried to employ the female members of my family, some of who you all met and talked to and what have you, is that, again, and this is what I've done this all my life, let's make sure we don't do anything to provoke wrong actions. Because if I come or somebody else come, whether it's law enforcement officials, your brother, or the fellas that you know, if we come after somebody has put their hands on you, it doesn't negate the fact that they already put their hands on you. So let's try to make sure that we can do our part in making sure that that doesn't happen. Now, you got some dudes that are just horrible, and they're going to do it anyway. And there's never an excuse to put your hands on a woman. But domestic violence or or whatever the case may be, with men putting their hands on women is obviously a very real issue in our society. And I think that just talking about what guys shouldn't do, we got to also make sure that you can do your part to do whatever you can do to try to make sure it doesn't happen. We know they're wrong. We know they're criminal. We know they probably deserve to be in jail. In Ray Rice's case, he probably deserves more than the 2-game suspension, which we both acknowledged. But at the same time, we also have to make sure that we learn as much as we can about elements of provocation. Not that there's real provocation, but the elements of provocation, you got to make sure that you address it, because what we've got to do is do what we can to try to prevent the situation from happening in any way. Good morning. On Friday, speaking right here on First Take on the subject of domestic violence, I made what can only amount to the most egregious error of my career. While elaborating on thoughts concerning the NFL's ruling versus Ray Rice, following a domestic dispute with his then fiancée, I ventured beyond the scope of our discussion by alluding to a woman's role in such heinous matters, going so far as to use the word provoke in my diatribe. My words came across that it is somehow a woman's fault. This was not my intent. It is not what I was trying to say. Yet the failure to clearly articulate something different lies squarely on my shoulders. To say what I actually said was foolish is an understatement. To say I was wrong is obvious. To apologize, to say I'm sorry, doesn't do the matter its proper justice, to be quite honest. But I do sincerely apologize. As a man raised by the greatest mother in the world and 4 older sisters, I've religiously spoken out against domestic violence all of my life. I've done so repeatedly over 20 years in this business, as well as over these very airwaves right here on First Take. My primary reason for doing so is because I've experienced and dealt with the matter within my own family. Unfortunately, I did an incredibly poor job of asserting my point of view this past Friday. For that, again, I am truly sorry.
So you saw the first video clip of Ray Rice dragging his fiance from the elevator. She's knocked unconscious, she's lying on the ground, and he's dragging her from the elevator. It is undisputed that Ray Rice knocked his girlfriend out. He admitted that he engaged in acts of domestic violence. He was charged with felony aggravated assault. And eventually he was accepted into a diversionary program, which will give him an opportunity to have his record expunged. Now, I wasn't going to talk about Ray Rice or Stephen A. Smith until I saw a couple of videos. And, I saw one video by Philly Just, and I saw another video by a respected scholar, Boyce Watkins. So I decided to do this video response. In Philly Just video, he basically implied that because Ray Rice didn't receive a sentence, because he wasn't convicted to jail time, that somehow that implies or that suggests that his fiance was equally culpable with respect to this domestic violence incident. He implied that basically she must have hit him or, punched him or was equally responsible for what happened. Let's be clear, there is no video footage that has been released to the public proving that argument. Another point that needs to be made, she hasn't been charged with any crime as far as I know. She hasn't been convicted of any crime. So let's move away from speculation and deal with established facts. The established fact is that Ray Rice knocked out his fiance. He engaged in acts of domestic violence. And instead of punishing this man the way he should have been punished, the NFL decided to give him a slap on the wrist. They decided to merely suspend him for a couple of games. My question is, what does that say about the NFL? What kind of message are they sending to young men? What kind of message are they sending to the American public? I'll tell you what kind of message they're sending. They're basically saying that black women don't matter. They're saying that women in general don't matter. Because I'm sure that there are plenty of examples of the NFL imposing harsher sentences or punishment for people engaging in conduct that's less severe. You have the situation of Michael Vick. He was punished for engaging in acts of cruelty towards animals, towards dogs. A dog's life has more value in this society than a black woman's life. A dog's safety and security has more value in this society than a black woman's safety and security. Brother Malcolm X told us that black women are the least respected and protected in this society. And the NFL has proven Malcolm right by giving this man such a light punishment for what he did. They should be ashamed of themselves. They are a disgrace to this nation for issuing such a weak punishment. Now that I've talked about Ray Rice, I'm going to move on to talk about Stephen A. Smith. But before I do that, I just want to go back to Ray Rice real quick and deal with this whole issue about his fiance allegedly being equally culpable, as Philly just suggested. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Ray Rice is able to afford the best attorneys. That's the only reason why this man received such a light punishment. If he was just a man on the street, your average working man, there is no way in hell that he would have received such a light punishment from the court system. That's just the reality. All right, so let's get back to Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith made some statements about the Ray Rice situation. After, it was discovered that the NFL was only going to suspend him for a couple of games. Stephen A. Smith basically talked about this whole issue of domestic violence. And many people are defending and supporting Stephen A. Smith. They are saying that he did not condone domestic violence. They point out how he talked about how he's against domestic violence and how he would take action if someone committed domestic violence against the female members of his family. And that aspect of what he said, I support it. Obviously, anyone with a conscience would support that aspect of what he said. The problem with his statement deals with the provocation element. When he talked about how women should not do anything to provoke a man. Now, when I was watching Philly Just's video, he basically suggested or stated that Stephen A. Smith was merely limiting his comments to situations where a woman physically attacks a man, where a woman engages in manly type conduct. And Philly just basically said that if a woman engages in that kind of conduct, she shouldn't be surprised if a man responds to her like a man responds to a man. Now, let's be clear. Stephen A. Smith's comments were much broader than that. He talked about provocation in general. He did not limit his discussion of provocation to acts of physical violence. Anyone who's familiar with domestic violence understands that abusers are easily provoked by anything. And a woman should not have to basically bow down to a man and walk on eggshells in order to avoid being brutalized. We should not shift the blame to the victims of domestic violence. The blame should be pointed directly at the abuser. It should be pointed at the man that punches the woman. It should be pointed at him. Again, abusers are easily provoked. They can be provoked by a woman not washing the dishes or not cleaning the house properly the way they see it. They can be provoked by a woman's tone in her voice or by certain statements that she makes. They can be provoked by a woman making a certain look or a glance at the man or a glance at another man. Or they can be provoked by what a woman wears, how a woman conducts herself just in general. Abusers are easily provoked. And there's an excellent article written that's about Goldie Taylor. And I will provide a link to that article in the description of this video. That article basically talks about how Goldie Taylor issued a lot of tweets or made a lot of tweets after she heard about this Stephen A. Smith situation. She tweeted about it. She talked about how she was a victim of domestic violence. She talked about how her abuser was provoked easily. Anything could provoke his conduct, provoke him to attack her. She talked about how she was abused for a long period of time. She talked about how her family basically asked her, what did she do wrong? What did she do to provoke this man? She talked about how her family did not protect her. The brothers in her family didn't protect her. They allowed the abuse to continue. They tried to rationalize the abuse. And that's basically what Stephen A. Smith did by making those statements. He basically shifted the blame to the victim. And that's unacceptable. That is completely unacceptable. And I'm glad that the network decided to suspend him. And it's just a light suspension. It's only a week. And people are whining and crying and acting like this is the end of the world or something. I don't have any sympathy for this guy. And, instead of hating on, the people that push for action to be taken against this man, we should be looking at their model of action. We need to ask ourselves, what can we do to be as effective or even more effective than these women's rights groups? This man was on television condoning racial profiling, basically, when he vouched for Mark Cuban. Was the black community as organized as the women's groups when that happened? No. We gave this fool a pass. When he basically supported Kobe Bryant's ridiculous statements about Trayvon Martin, the black community said some things online, but that was pretty much it. We didn't take action. We have to learn from these other groups. We have to learn from how they deal with the opposition. And any black man that vouches for racial profiling, defends racists, they need to be challenged and not defended. It's like all of a sudden when these people get in trouble, they want to be black now, when the whole time before they were throwing black people under the bus. Stephen A. Smith's black card needs to be revoked. Instead of defending this guy, we should not be defending him. He's the last person we should be wasting our breath and energy defending. Let's save that energy for those who are worthy.